Good morning. Woohoo! Yeah, it's a happy day and great day to be at the Center for Spiritual Living in Las Cruces, and we're going to get started with a couple of songs. We have parts today. Yay. If you'd like to stand, please do and join us in singing.
Sacred love is all that you are. You are sacred love is all that you are. You are sacred love is all that you are. You are sacred love, God, sacred love is all that you are. You are sacred love is all that you are. You are sacred love, God, sacred love is all that you are. Show the way, God, show the way. I want to live in such a state of grace. Lead the way, God, lead the way. I want to live in such a holy place. Such a holy place. You are blessed peace is all that you are. You are blessed peace, God, blessed peace is all that you are. You are deepest joy is all that you are. You are deepest joy, God, deepest joy is all that you are. Show the way, God, show the way. I want to live in such a state of grace. Lead the way, God, lead the way. I want to live in such a holy place. Such a holy place. You are sacred love is all that you are. You are sacred love, God, sacred love is all that you are. Sacred love is all that you are. Sacred love is all that you are. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
Okay. All right, perfect.
Good morning. Good to see you all. And everyone out there on Zoom, I'm sure you look as good as these people do right here. I'm Judy Hunt, a practitioner here at the Center for Spiritual Living in the heart of Las Cruces. Everybody hearing me okay? No. Yes, I heard a no? Did I hear a yes and a no? Okay. I'll blast you. How about that? Okay. Better? Yes. Okay, and I'll stand right here too. By golly. Welcome. Oh, our belief is a world in loving partnership for the good of us all. That's what we stand for here. And welcome to anyone visiting for the first time. We have really good visitor packets at each door, and they include a coupon for the bookstore, so be sure and get one of those if that applies to you. We are still collecting luggage for foster kids and coats for our free coat giveaway. And it's getting colder, so if there's any coats or luggage that you're not using at home, please bring them, and we will put them to good use. And one more big thank you to all the people who helped at the very successful treasure sale. It was really marvelous. 17 people throughout the event pitched in. So it's a really good representation. Yes. You should be proud of yourselves. We're certainly proud. Our service project for November is on Sunday the 20th. And that is, we're going to do holiday card signing and making. And we take these out to senior homes and places where maybe people aren't getting the recognition they're looking for. So we help with that. So that's going to be fun, and that's right after the service. We'll have snacks and coffee. And it says something about tying blankets, so that'll be interesting because I don't know what it means. But so that is the 20th right after service. And then we'll have the 46th birthday celebration for this center on December 4th after the service. So a big deal. Yeah. Again, yes, indeed. So we will provide cake and coffee and a wonderful journey into creative playtime. So if you want to bring food, then we'd have cake and coffee and some stuff to balance that. We wouldn't go dancing into the streets. And be sure and look at, this is what our schedule of events looks like now. It's at the back table. So it's a little hard to notice, but you might want to have one of these at home so you know everything that's going on. We believe in the power of prayer here. We practice it, we believe it, and we use it. And we have a wonderful prayer circle that meets every Tuesday. And we pray with you on your concerns. And how to let us know you have an issue is there are prayer request forms on the back of each seat. So fill that out and leave it in the God box there or the offering bowl. And I will see that they get to the group. We have a wonderful group of 4 ministers, practitioners. It's really rich. I really recommend taking us up on it. And there are gratitude cards also there available. So let us know when these prayers are answered and life is going great and things have worked out. So then we can kind of celebrate with you as well. So, and after service, there's 2 of us with the stole on so far. So we will be up here and we can do a quick prayer with you on anything that you're carrying today, that your Sunday would be much better off without it. So please, it's why we're here, so use it. I love it when people do, so share that with us. I'm grateful. So now it's time for song, silence, and prayer.
I
as we remember who we are, we know that we are spirit expressing. That spirit is in us, through us, and always for us. And that there is good beyond our imagining, and peace, and joy, and harmony, and all the guidance we could ask for. It is all there at our fingertips. And today we practice opening to that. We practice, and we let go and remember who we truly are. And we let God express through us so that life is easy and harmonious, and we see only good and love as God sees. We are so blessed by this teaching, by this way of moving through our lives. Let it take you away this week into more beauty and more love than ever before. And so it is. Our reading today is from our founder, Ernest Holmes. He wrote a textbook called The Science of Mind. How to Demonstrate a Home. All our beautiful dreams, all our wishing and praying for material good will reach no higher level in our experience than our belief in the power of God and in its willingness to help us. God's willingness to help us is expressed in the existence of that immutable law, which gives us exactly the type of objective experience for which we build a mental likeness. If we have the mental equivalent of a commodious home, roomy, light, cheery, and an income in keeping with it, if we are able to build in mind the kind of home we wish, and there is nothing in our subjective thought that denies this, then we shall be able to decide and demonstrate for ourselves the kind of home we desire. And so it is.
This is a song that I first heard when visiting my sister in Canada, in Nova Scotia. The song is by an artist up there named Matt Anderson, and it's called Home Sweet Home. And thank you, Sarah, for providing some harmonies tonight today. Good? Okay. You are my home. You are my home, sweet home. You are resting on my mind when I'm far away alone. You are my home, sweet home. My house is only brick and stones, 4 walls and a refuge from the cold. A body is only flesh and blood until it's filled with the love from someone else's soul. It's only brick and stone. You are my home. You are my home, sweet home. You are resting on my mind when I'm far away alone. You are my home, sweet home. I'll follow where you lead, no matter how far it may seem. You're the only star I need. See, you come and you rescue me. I'll follow where you lead. You are my home. You are my home, sweet home. You are resting on my mind when I'm far away alone. You are my home, sweet home. Harbor lights and endless nights, and a wind that always blows. Turn me round, don't let me drown. Take me with you when you go. You are my home. You are my home, sweet home. You're resting on my mind when I'm far away alone. You are my home, sweet home. You are resting on my mind when I'm far away alone. You are my home, sweet home.
Perfect. Wasn't that beautiful? I was thinking as we were singing our songs at the beginning and then just listening to them, we've had a transition in our music, but we have started to find our voice as a community. Didn't it sound beautiful? Yeah, so just give yourselves a hand and them. Thank you, Sarah, for all your work, and Kay and Doug, and everyone who's added to the sound that we're discovering that is ours. It just feels good. It sounded absolutely wonderful. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Reverend Bonnie, the community spiritual leader here at the Center for Spiritual Living in the heart of Las Cruces. And I want to welcome you to November. Can you believe we are already in November? Yeah, here we are. So several years ago, I had a friend tell me that they didn't know or feel like they had ever been at home, that they didn't ever feel like they belonged. I see a lot of heads nodding out there. And I see Catherine waving at me from the back. So I asked her, well, what does it feel like to be at home? What does it mean to be at home? And she said, I don't know. And so I'm going to ask you, what does it feel like to be at home? How do you know when you have arrived home? And I'll repeat what you say since we don't have a mic out there. How do you know when you're home? What does home feel like? Yes?
When you're in your heart.
When you're in your heart.
At rest.
At rest. Safe, comfortable, peaceful. Like you can be yourself. Yeah. So, are there any foods or smells that let you know you're home? Oh, cookies. Other people are nodding their heads. Yes, there's certain things that let you know. Pat? Her mom's chocolate cake. A turkey in the oven. Yeah, there's lots of different things that speak to us that we're home. And my question to her after she said she didn't know was, well, if you don't know, then how do you know you've never been there? If you don't know, how do you know when you've arrived? And I ask people that often when they're seeking something, and I say, how are you going to know you've received it if you don't know what it is that you're looking for? If you don't know how it feels or the feeling that you're looking for, how do you know when you've arrived? So this month, our focus, as you've probably guessed by now, is on home. And it's the idea of the hero's journey, that idea that we sometimes leave home and then return home. It's being called home, it's home itself. So how can we go home, return home, or be called home if we don't even know what home is to us? If we haven't figured that out. So this idea came to me. I started thinking I need to home in on home. And then I thought, well, is it home in or hone in on home? So of course I had to look them up. And in the English language, apparently homing in on and honing in on, for those of you might not be hearing, there's an M and an N difference in that word. It's interchangeable often in the English language, but there's a subtle difference in the meaning. So homing in on something is when you're focused on a target, you're pinpointing on something. They said, think of a homing pigeon, how it's homing in on heading back home. Honing in is to develop and improve something, especially a skill, over a period of time. So then I thought, okay, so if we're trying to figure out what home is, we might need to hone in on the skills that help us to find home, to stay there when we get there, and to allow ourselves to return when necessary. So I said for this week and next, because I'm speaking again next week as well, we are going to home in on home this week so that we can hone in on home, and so I hope you get it. I hope that makes sense. So like a lot of you, for me, home means a place where I feel safe and secure. It's a place where I've created the beauty that I appreciate in my home and around my home. It's where I'm comfortable and where I can be myself. Now that hasn't been true 100% of my experience of living in a home. But that's my ideal. That's what I'm aiming for. That's what I think of when I think of home. And so I assume, like many of you, the expectation when I was growing up is that I would leave home. And in my home, we were told, 18, we're done. We aren't responsible for you anymore. You are on your own. And so we were expected to leave home as close to 18 as possible. And I turned 18 in April and left in May. So I did pretty close. And it was the expectation for me and most of the people that I was around, and I see a lot of heads nodding again, so I assume that many of you felt the same or experienced the same. And that was true so much in the culture here in the U.S. that today it's actually newsworthy that the children today, the millennials, are staying home longer than they used to. So I decided to look it up, and I said, I Googled, what's the average age that children are leaving home now compared to the 1970s, which is when I left home. And there was a lot of articles about it. So if you're interested, you can look it up. But one of the articles was titled, "Millennials are setting new records, for living with their parents longer." And there was a note in there that I need to also mention, that this is in the United States. There are many cultures around the world where people don't leave home, where they're expected to live intergenerationally, and that is the norm. But here in the U.S., it became the norm for us to leave home. And so one article also said that there are more women living at home with their parents today than there were in the 1940s. Can you believe that? I was stunned. I was surprised. I thought, wow. So things are changing, and we've had an experience, because I see, again, a lot of agreement in the room with that idea that we were to leave home, and at some level, the expectation is that we will leave home. And we leave home for a lot of different reasons. Some of us leave home because we're going towards something. We might be leaving home to go to college, to get married, to travel. Maybe we have a new job, so we're leaving home to go live closer to that job. Some of us leave home to get away from something, to leave something. We're leaving possibly an overcrowded situation where we're expected to go earn some money and send it back and help in that situation. We leave to get away from abuse. We leave to get away from unpleasant memories. So regardless of why we left, we were still expected to leave home and to go out at some point. And then, somewhere in our life, we feel that calling to return home. Whether we return to the home that was our childhood home, or whether we feel the calling to create a home of our own that we can return to. So again, I think there are different reasons that we get called home. Sometimes we're needed back there, so we go back. Other times we need help. So that's what's happened with a lot of the millennials, apparently. They can't afford to stay out on their own, so they return home. Or we get called home just to visit for the holidays or whatever the other reasons are that we go back and visit our childhood homes. Sometimes it's to make amends. And sometimes it's to celebrate or commemorate. Sometimes when someone passes, the family all gathers in the family home. So you all are nodding your heads, so I know you know this. This idea of journeying away from home and returning is epic. It's in so many of the stories that we read, in the movies that we watch, and it's familiar to us and to what we've seen in the people's lives around us. And like most things that we discuss here at the center, it has many layers to it as we talk about and think about home. We can look at that physical idea of leaving our family home and returning, but we can also look at emotional, mental, and spiritual, leaving home and returning. And many of the things you mentioned for home were those internal things, where your heart is, where love is. So how do we sometimes venture away from that and return to that inner home? Metaphysically, we can look at these journeys and what they mean to us, and how it is we sometimes venture away and then find our way back. So this month, I encourage you all to consider your journey. What journeys have you taken away from home on all those different levels? How have you found your way back? What does home mean to you? What is your own hero's journey, your own adventure that you've been on? And I'm sure all of you have heard the phrase, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. And where is that from? Wizard of Oz. Okay, y'all went to the same school. And so I found this book. Actually, Reverend Terry Lund gave this to me years ago. It's by Jean Houston, called The Wizard of Us, Transformational Lessons from Oz. It's a great book, but she takes that story of the Wizard of Oz and she looks at Joseph Campbell's hero's journey concept, applies it to that story, and then brings forward lessons that we can learn for ourselves in our journeys, in our life. And so in here, near the end of the book, because you know the story, we know that Dorothy was supposed to go home in the balloon that was going to be with the man that turned out to be behind the wizard, remember? So she gets in the basket, it starts to take off, and Toto jumps out of the basket. Dorothy jumps out after Toto, and the basket has to go. The balloon is already let go, and he can't bring it back down to ground. So Dorothy is afraid she's not going to make it back home to Kansas. And then her friend arrives in the bubble. Remember Glenda? She arrives in the bubble, and Dorothy says, "Oh, will you help me? Can you help me?" Dorothy begs the good witch, Glenda. And Glenda says, "You don't need to be helped any longer. You've always had the power to go to Kansas." And the Scarecrow says, "Well, why didn't you tell her that before?" And she says, "Because she wouldn't have believed me. She had to learn it for herself." So the Tin Man looks at her and says, "Well, Dorothy, what have you learned?" And she says, "Well, I think that it wasn't enough just to want to see Uncle Henry and Auntie Em. And it's that if I'm ever to go looking for my heart's desire again, I won't look any further than my own backyard, because if it isn't there, I never really lost it to begin with, right?" And Glenda happily confirms that's all it is. Remember that voice she had? Dorothy sees that her power, and this is Jean Houston's interpretation, she sees that her power arises from within her. Glenda reveals the secret of the ruby slippers and tells Dorothy that all she has to do is close her eyes, click her heels together 3 times, and say that sacred mantra, "There's no place like home. There's no place like home." And then Jean goes on further in here to explain some more about this idea. She said part of Dorothy's experience was scary. She left Kansas on the back of a twister. She found herself in a world where none of the normal rules applied and was hunted by an evil witch. Yet she also met her entelechy. I had to look that word up, and that means a realization of her potential, through her great friend in Glenda, and had a magical allies who joined her on an adventure that changed her life and her way of being. Throughout it all, she stood in her integrity. She did what came naturally to her and became much more than she could have ever imagined. The girl returned from Oz in the profoundly mature condition of one who has undergone a full initiation, embodying the realm that lies over the rainbow, the deepened and extended land. Dorothy looks around at the warm faces in the room and tears come to her eyes and she says, "Oh, Annie M., there's no place like home." And at last we've reached that final step in Campbell's hero's journey known as freedom to live. Our hero has returned as the master of 2 worlds, and may now move beyond the fear of death to live as one who truly lives in the moment, neither anticipating the future nor regretting the past. What an interpretation, right? Isn't that great? So, as I thought about that, and I thought about that hero's journey that we all have had in some way, are there lessons that you learned by venturing out in the world that you had to learn on your own? Might there have been a Glenda in your life who could have told you, warned you, but you wouldn't have listened? Yeah. Yeah. Were there people that joined you on the way, people that you might have felt stronger because you were defending, or just joined you in that path and on that walk? The Wizard of Oz in this story, as we know it, because the author wrote other books to follow, ends when she arrives back in Kansas. And so I was thinking, what happens then when that journey is completed? We return home. What happens when we get back home with this newly discovered self? I heard an interview on NPR once, a psychiatrist who is apparently well known, and he said, I have helped so many people. I have a PhD. I've won awards and I've written books. But every time I go home and sit at my mother's table, I become 3 or 5 or 10 years old. Why? Why is that? That we go out in the world, we leave on this great adventure, we learn so much. How can we bring our newly discovered truth back home when we return home? How can we bring our true selves back home? The mature us, the learned us, the grown-up us. So I'm just planting some seeds for thought. And now as we journey, I'm going to take us on a little fork in the road. Because in terms of a physical home, we often refer to the earth as our home. That this is our home. And so unless you've been on a rocket and gone to the moon or left this universe, you've never left home, right? You've always been here, and yet we often say we have to get down to earth, like we've left it somehow. So we could say we need to consciously return to our earth home. And what would that look like? Reverend Kathy Hearn told my graduating class from the Holmes Institute, don't be so spiritual that you're no earthly good. What does that mean? You know, what does that mean? How do we get so spiritual that we are no longer any earthly good? How do we return to earth and bring what we know back to those that we are trying to be of earthly good to? I think there are many ways for us to return home to earth as well, consciously. And so I wanted to share with you another returning home story. This is out of Braiding Sweetgrass, again, Robin Kimmerer. I've shared from this before. And in here, she tells the story of how the salmon leave home, essentially during the summer. They go down the freshwater rivers into the saltwater ocean. And then they have to leave saltwater and return to freshwater when they come home in the fall. And the Native Americans who lived along those rivers and depended on the salmon for food, they would stand along the sides of the rivers and wait for what they referred to as their brother Chinook upon its return. And I love how she words this, so I want to share with you. She says, they are all standing along the river, singing a welcome, a song of praise as the food swims up the river, fin to fin. The nets stay on the shore. The spears still hang in the house. The hook-jawed leaders, those are the hook-jawed salmon, the Chinook, are allowed to pass, to guide the others and to carry the message to their upriver relatives that the people are grateful and full of respect. The fish course by the camp in great throngs, unmolested as they make their way upstream. Only after 4 days of fish moving safely by is the first salmon taken by the most honored fisher and prepared with ritual care. It is carried to the feast in a great ceremony on a cedar plank in a bed of ferns, and then they feast on the sacred foods of salmon, venison, roots, and berries in a sequence for their place in the watershed, and they celebrate the water that connects them all in a ritual of passing a cup. They dance in long lines. They sing thanks for all that is given. The salmon bones are placed back in the river with their heads facing upstream so that their spirits may follow the others. They are destined to die as we are all destined to die, but first they have bound themselves to life in an ancient agreement to pass it on. To pass it on. In so doing, the world itself is renewed. Only then are the nets set out, the wares are put in place, and the harvest begins. Everyone has a task. The elder counsels the young one with a spear. Take only what you need and let the rest go by, and the fish will last forever. When the drying racks are full with winter food, they simply stop fishing. So she talks about ceremony, that ceremony of welcoming. And it made me think about this idea of leaving home and coming back, something that we often do in our lives in different ways. And what kinds of ceremonies we have to welcome people back or when they're leaving. And she talks about the importance of ceremony and how we have ritual in our lives. And she says this: ceremony focuses attention so that attention becomes intention. I'm going to repeat that because that's the line I love. Ceremony focuses attention so that attention becomes intention. If you stand together and profess a thing before your community, it holds you accountable. Ceremonies transcend the boundaries of the individual and resonate beyond the human realm. These acts of reverence are powerfully pragmatic. They are ceremonies that magnify life. And she talks about ceremonies within her tradition as well as the ones that are in sort of the average societies that we are in. And she talks about the different ways that ceremonies are important to us. And she says, to have agency in the world, ceremonies should be reciprocal co-creations, organic in nature, in which community creates ceremony and the ceremony creates communities. She does say they should not be cultural appropriations from Native people. So she's speaking to those of us who might be tempted to go, oh, that looks like fun. Instead, in our communities, how do we develop organic ceremonies that we develop together that also then help to create the community that we're a part of? So those two things I found very helpful from that book. This idea that ceremony focuses attention so that attention becomes intention, and that the communities create ceremony and ceremony helps create community. And so again, I was thinking about what kinds of rituals do we have in our lives? Do we have any within our families, within our chosen families, that are ceremonies about welcoming people home and what happens when people leave? One of the things I've seen over the years that tends to happen, especially in families, when people are getting ready to leave, there's usually a big blowout and a fight. Anybody ever had that experience? What I've been told is that it's easier to part when you're angry than when you're sad. So I encourage people to become conscious of what rituals, whether it's something that festers a fight, we have for partings and returns. And can we consciously create something that supports what we would rather experience? Can we create a ritual that supports the love that we have when someone leaves home and then when they return? How do we welcome them back? Because I think at this time of year, you might be the ones welcoming someone into your home, or you might be returning back to a home. So it can work either direction. So one of the struggles that I've had in life is looking at things like the ceremony and the tradition that she was sharing in Braided Sweetgrass. And this idea that I hear often, it's always done this way, and I've said it often. Some people in here have heard me say, we've always done it this way. That, compared to what Ernest Holmes says about principle, isn't rooted in precedence. That we're always evolving, there's always newness. So how do we keep the valued ceremonies and rituals and traditions and our ways of doing things and allow for that evolution and change and invent things that serve us better than maybe some of the things that have started to happen in our communities or families? And the story of the salmon had more messages for me in it. One of the things that happened is new people came into the area, and they judged the Native Americans for being lazy because they waited 4 days to start fishing. So why were they letting all these wonderful fish go by? They must be lazy. Instead of getting curious about why, what was the why behind that ceremony? What was the why behind the value in that ceremony was that it allowed the fish to be sustained, and it allowed them to be sustained by the fish. So I think it's important that we explore the why behind the ceremonies and rituals in our lives. What is it that is of value in that? And can we carry the importance of the why forward as we might evolve and develop new and different ways of doing things? So once again, I got some more information out of the book I've been sharing with you, Anchored, How to Befriend Your Nervous System Using Polyvagal Theory. And again, these terms are huge, but one of the things that I've gotten to on chapter 8 here, she calls it gentle shaping. And she talks about how when we've moved into that place of becoming aware of what our nervous system does, so we naturally move into fight or flight when something happens, and when we realize that, how can we work with our nervous system to bring it back into that place where we feel safe and comfortable at home? How can we do that, and how can we come up with different ways of responding? And she calls it gentle shaping, and she says, stretch, don't stress. Our goal in shaping new patterns is to stretch, but not stress our system. We want to stretch, feel the shape of a new pattern, and then spend some time savoring it. I love that idea. So again, as we try new things, we can stretch a bit and then sit with it. See how it feels. Savor that new feeling. When we feel as if we need to power through an experience or that we need to suffer to see results, we stress the system and we move into one of the survival states, which is that fight or flight, which we're trying to not move into. She says, once this happens, we're no longer shaping. Instead, we're held in a familiar pattern of protection. The no pain, no gain model doesn't work with the automatic reshaping. So that goal of trying to just stretch. She said, in order to change, it's necessary to find the right degree of challenge that keeps us safely anchored in the shaping process. Shaping is about attending moment to what is happening in our automatic nervous system, connecting with the information, and respecting what we find. So, for me, that was a lovely example of how it is that we might allow ourselves to shift and change and grow, but in a more gentle manner. I know for some of us, our spiritual evolution and our emotional growth when we left home happened through stress and pain and suffering and all of that challenging stuff that we go through, fear. And that's true for what Dorothy experienced in The Wizard of Oz. And that is a way that we can grow. But like in braiding sweetgrass, I think there's value in ceremony and tradition, and in the anchoring story, this idea of stretching and allowing that reshaping to take place without all of that pain. Ernest Holmes teaches we don't have to experience pain to grow. We don't have to stress our systems, whether it's our physical body systems, our emotional systems, or the earth systems, in order for us to evolve and change. So I want to look at one more story that has to do with leaving home and then returning home. And this one is probably familiar to many of you that come out of the Christian tradition. It's known as the prodigal son. And in the Science of Mind text, there's a whole interpretation of that story from page 461 to 469 that Ernest Holmes does. And I encourage you this month, as we're talking about home and the hero's journey, to read that story again. There's a lot of good information in there. So he's taking that story and then giving us a metaphysical interpretation of it. So I'm just going to summarize it and encourage you to read it for yourself and see what else you can get from it. So the story itself is a wealthy man has 2 sons, and when the sons grow up, one of the sons decides that he wants to take his inheritance and leave home and go out into the world and adventure and see what he can find. And the verbiage that they use is he gets out there and he squanders everything and he ends up with nothing. He's on the street, he has no food, he's eating slop that the pigs are eating, and he determines that his father's servants have more than he does out there. And so Ernest Holmes refers to that as the Great Awakening. He realizes if he went back home and just said, let me be a servant, that he would have more than if he was out on the street. And Ernest Holmes equates that to our relationship to the universe itself, that is forever giving, always has plenty. And when we have that great awakening, we realize that there is always enough in our world. We have to just shift that thinking process that we have while we're out there. And then he said, the man then decides because of this, he's going to go back home. And on his way, his father sees him coming down the road, and it says he runs to him and throws his arms around his neck and welcomes him back. And Ernest Holmes talks about how important it is for us to realize that no matter how far away from home, no matter what we do that might be feeling like separation from the truth of who we are always greeted and turned to and welcomed back, no matter what. And what he points out, too, is that the father won't listen to the son trying to tell him all the bad things he'd done, and I'm so sinful. Father's like, no. We're celebrating you. You've come home. You've come back. And he says that's the way it is when we return to that inner home, that truth of who we are inside ourselves. It just wants to celebrate. It's not there to beat us up or tell us that we were bad, that we did anything wrong. And so he says, get the best robe and put it on him. Get the fatted calf and slaughter it, and let's have a big celebration and a meal. And he's celebrating the fact that this guy came back. And he said in there that the son found everything in the father's house just as he had left it. Nothing had changed, and he was made welcome to all the divine stores. So I thought about that. Sometimes we can go home and everything looks the same. And the truth of spirit and source is that it is unchanging. So that is the peace that is the same. When we find our way back to that truth in here, it hasn't changed. It is consistent. But I also know in this story, there was the second son, and they mention his response. He didn't like the fact that he had stayed home. He'd learned the farm business. He'd been helping his dad. He'd been doing the right thing the whole time, and he wasn't getting a celebration. This guy who left and squandered everything came home and got a celebration. Both sons had changed, right? Both of them had had experiences. So even though the source was the same, we evolve and we change. And Ernest Holmes also says in the Science of Mind text, the spiral of life is upward. Evolution carries us forward, not backward. So once again, both things are happening. The source stays the same and we evolve. How we express it, how we experience it evolves. And so one of the things that I have often discovered is the greatest gift we can give another person is to recognize their growth, to recognize their change, especially if they're someone we've known a long time and they're coming back. Our tendency is to want to treat them exactly the same, like a kid if they were our kid, or like the way they were, like maybe we partied together and now they're sober. And we still, come on, we don't allow for that growth. So the biggest gift we can give is to recognize the evolution and the change while the love we have for each other and that connection stays the same. So I think it's important as we consider these holidays and whatever experiences you have with returning home or people returning home to you, to honor and recognize their growth, their evolution, and honor and recognize your own growth, your own evolution, and take that new, matured self into whatever situation that you are going into. As we move into these holidays, let's take some time to think about, what does home mean to you? How do we create home in our spaces? What rituals and ceremonies can we do that will welcome people, and when we have to separate, that we can separate gently and lovingly? What would you like to experience? And how can you bring the truth of who you are, your true nature, into those experiences, that evolved and mature self that you have gotten to now? How do you bring that into your home? So next week, I'm going to be looking at honing in on those skills, how we can do that when we arrive at home. And this week, I was thinking, as you move into this season, if you start to feel scattered or challenged, just go within and say, there's no place like home. And it came to me with two different emphases. There is no place like home, and there's no place like home. And so it is. So let's just go within to our home, to that space inside where we connect in with spirit, the truth of our nature. And just breathe into that space and feel what it's like to be here in this space where you're safe, comfortable, at home in your spiritual community's home. Breathe in and acknowledge this feeling of strength and wholeness. And know that this is the real you that's moving out into the world in all situations. So we open our hearts and minds to fully experience that, to savor the moments, to stretch when we need to stretch, and to allow ourselves to be evolved and changed while honoring and respecting our traditions and the ways that we've done things with people, friends, and family. And so I'm grateful for this awareness and this time of celebrating home in all of its layers and ways of expressing. As we together as a spiritual community look at our own home here and how it is we want to be more welcoming and open and allowing of change and truth and tradition. And so I'm grateful for this time and this coming together, and I just know that it is good. And so it is.
This song is called In This Moment. It's by Karen Mitchell. And I think it's a good song for, I liked what Andrew said about that home being, that kind of return to the heart. So this kind of talks about where to go when we get a little bit lost. When I forget we are one, and I regret things that I've done, I go within my heart and soul. I start again, knowing I'm home. God is right here where I am. I am right where I should be. As I fill my mind with peace, I feel it washing over me. God is right here where I am, flowing in and out through me. In this moment, I am free. When things go wrong and my way is dark, and when I lose my song and life breaks my heart, I go within my heart and soul. I start again, knowing I'm home. God is right here where I am. I am right where I should be. As I fill my mind with peace, I feel it washing over me. Life is right here where I am, flowing in and out through me.
this moment I am free. In this moment I am free.
Beautiful. That was perfect. Thank you. I feel like that took us home in a whole new but the same way. Thank you. That was perfect. And I see that Reverend Bonnie Allen Rice snuck in the back, so I want to recognize her, and she will be the one leading our workshop on our birthday to that creative place. So if you have any questions about that, you can ask her after the service. We're excited about that. It will be a fun adventure into creativity with her as a way to celebrate. And to answer the question about the tying of the blankets, it's 2 pieces of felt that you tie together so it's doubled up. We take it to the people who need something warm over their legs. Again, we take them into the homes and we give them, I believe they went to the fire stations to be given to people as well. So that's something that Teresa will be guiding us through on the 20th for our special service. And last week we had a beautiful time with Dina Efferson Williams, and she sent a letter that I want to read to you. Greetings and blessings to you all. Frank and I wish to extend our deepest and most sincere appreciation to all of you. To the boards of Unity and CSL Las Cruces, to Reverend Bonnie and Reverend Helen, we are forever grateful for your yes. We would want to visit in the future. To the congregations of both churches, thank you for the love which filled our hearts and continues to expand each time we think of your communities. We fell in love with every last one of you. I will check in to see how the experiments are going. The 1-minute enlightened millionaire is a game changer for everyone. Once again, thank you and namaste, Dina Efferson Williams. So wanted to share that with you because I do think we will have her back. People seem to really enjoy the time that we had with her. And so this is the time when we consider and think about giving back to the center, that place where hopefully you've been fed a little bit here this morning. Please remember that we have the ability to also give sort of painlessly if you happen to use Amazon. If you go to Smile Amazon and choose the Center for Spiritual Living, we get a portion of all the purchases that you make through there. So remember that. And this month, the month of November, we're switching who we are tithing to. We always tithe 10% of all that comes into the center. Las Esperanzas is an educational, social, and charitable organization established to advocate for the renaissance of the Mesquite Historic District, which we are right close to, right over here, original town site of the city of Las Cruces, New Mexico. And through the revitalization of this neighborhood, the protection of our culture, and the preservation and renovation of our buildings, they also created what they call Safe Haven Weed and Seed Program, and that's the part that we like to support. It helps the kids in the afternoons. It helps make sure they have the things they need for school and sometimes even food. So we're grateful to Las Esperanzas and the programs that they do, and just right here in our neighborhood, just over a few blocks. So please know that 10% of anything that comes in here is going to support them this month. And so now let's say our joint blessing together. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God in me. And we will sing together, I am so blessed.
I am so blessed, I am so blessed, I am so grateful for all that I have. I am so blessed, I am so blessed, I am so grateful, I am so blessed. I am so blessed, I am so blessed, I am so grateful for all that I have. I am so blessed, I am so blessed, I am so grateful, I am so blessed, I am so grateful, I am so blessed.
So I hope you sing that to yourself and keep saying there's no place like home. Take yourself right back there all week. Thank you again, Sarah and Kay and Doug, for the music today. Now we will stand and sing our closing song, the peace song. And please remember that Judy's available for prayer after the service. And when Bob gets things shut down, Bob's available. Give him a minute. All right, let's sing the peace song.